My third topic, the topic of biblical codes. Now, many people out there are under the impression that somehow or other they discovered flaws in the biblical codes and that these were completely debunked and these things have absolutely no basis. And the truth is just the opposite. There is no way to debunk the biblical codes. Essentially, the argument goes as follows. The people putting in the information doctored the information to try to get a particular result. B, you can find patterns and codes in the New York Times. That might be true, and if you took away all of the vowels, you might find even greater codes within the New York Times or Wikipedia or Britannica. So what is the truth? The truth is that if you were to examine the Samaritan Torah, which in most places is an exact carbon copy of our Masoretic text, the Torah. The only difference between the Samaritan Torah and the Masoretic text is that the Samaritans tried to make the language fit into proper gender and number, and in places where certain vowels are missing, they added those vowels that were missing. And when you go ahead and examine the codes that were discovered by Rabbi Weissmandl and later on by the organization in Israel, which is the Torah Codes organization, these codes are almost not to be found in the Samaritan Torah. And this is incredibly what the originator of the Torah Codes was trying to express, that the Torah Codes are in such great preponderance, so many of them, and in such exact order. And furthermore, not only in exact order, but actually whenever they find the code is always relevant to the topic at hand. And they've done this not once or twice, but thousands of times, so that you can understand that the words of this document called the Torah is unlike any other document ever. Yes, you will find codes in every text. You will find codes in Shakespeare. It's not the number of codes that you find, but it's the concentration and the relevance of the codes to the topics at hand. Equal letter skipping, things that are found at equal letters, have no reason to be there except by a certain design. We believe that the Torah is the DNA of the world. God created the world looking into the Torah, and that every aspect of the world lies hidden in those letters which comprise the Torah. When you change the wording of the Torah, the codes would change. The differences between the traditional Masoretic text and other texts that exist out there that are accepted have a deviation of only 4 to 9 letters. In fact, the most authoritative Torah outside of the one that we have, which is the Yemenite Torah, only varies about 4 letters from our own Torah. And because of this, the codes that are found and that have been found are consistent throughout each and every Torah that we have, with very, very slight variations. However, any other document, when they change the letters around, the codes will not be there. The same Torah codes and the same preponderance of coding does not exist in the Samaritan Torah as with our Torah. And that should tell you just how unique this document is. You may ask, but there might have been a development, there may have been some kind of alteration in the course of time. And perhaps there were some ancient documents from which Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, recorded his Torah. And my answer to you is as follows. The reason why the Torah is unlike any other document is not because of the uniqueness of the source, but rather that once directed by God to be the text, that Torah had within it the divine DNA that forms the universe. And that's the reason why these codes are there in such abundance and so concentrated, and always, always has direct relevance to the topic at hand. I'll give you an example. I discovered that there is a 33-letter incremental code for AIDS in the story of Sodom. Now, there are shorter codes, but this one I discovered looking by myself in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when Lot is being told by the angel of God to get out of there, lest you will be destroyed by the sin of the city. The word that indicates the destruction is the word thiese. Thiese, the samach with a dagesh, with an accent mark, drew me attention to it. And I decided to look for, after the samach, I decided to look for a daled, which is a D. And I found a D 33 letters later. So I said, you know what, let's look for a yud, which is an I or a Y. Let's take a look and see if we can find it. Sure enough, 33 letters later, there was a yud. Then I looked for an aleph or an A, and 33 letters later, I found spelling out AIDS in 33-letter increments. The reason why it's spelled backwards is because AIDS is an English term, not a Hebrew term, and therefore is read from left to right. Hebrew is written from right to left, so it goes backwards, but would be read from left to right, like in American and English. Another interesting thing is that when you take the JTS version, which is not the traditional Masoretic text that we have, there is a difference, and you no longer have the code. And so you see, the traditional text that we have is by divine providence. God has placed it there because that text is the exact text that transmits the DNA of the world. The whole world is found in the Torah. Have a good and blessed